The night I walked across that stage to collect my degree, my sister was sitting in the front row wearing a white dress like she was the one being celebrated. My parents were clapping for her. People nearby were smiling at her. And somewhere in the third row, sitting on the lap of my neighbor Mrs. Patel, was a 2-year-old boy named Caleb who called me Mama and had never once heard his biological mother sing him to sleep. I had spent 3 years quietly disappearing so that my sister could publicly shine. I had given up sleep, opportunities, and the version of my 20s I had planned. And on the one night that belonged to me, my family found a way to make it about her again. But this time, something shifted. This time, the truth did not stay quiet. Before this story goes any further, I want to ask you something honestly. If you had spent 3 years carrying a responsibility that was never supposed to be yours, and the people who put it on you showed up at your most important moment trying to take the credit, what would you do? Would you stay silent one more time? Or would you finally let the truth speak for itself? Keep listening, because what happened next is something I never planned, and I am still living with the weight and the freedom of it. I'll write the full script directly for you right now, no files, just the complete script in the chat. A main title. My parents forced me to take my sister's baby. Her graduation stunt backfired publicly. B backup title 1. I raised my sister's son for 3 years while she lived her life. Then she showed up at my graduation. C backup title 2. They made me the backup plan and the full-time mother, until the day everyone found out the truth. D backup title 3. My family handed me a baby and a silence agreement. I kept both until my sister tried to take the credit. E thumbnail text. She took the stage, I had her baby. F hook paragraph. The night I walked across that stage to collect my degree, my sister was sitting in the front row wearing a white dress like she was the one being celebrated. My parents were clapping for her. People nearby were smiling at her. And somewhere in the third row, sitting on the lap of my neighbor Mrs. Patel, was a 2-year-old boy named Caleb who called me Mama and had never once heard his biological mother sing him to sleep. I had spent 3 years quietly disappearing so that my sister could publicly shine. I had given up sleep, opportunities, and the version of my 20s I had planned. And on the one night that belonged to me, my family found a way to make it about her again. But this time, something shifted. This time, the truth did not stay quiet. G unique CTA paragraph after hook. Before this story goes any further, I want to ask you something honestly. If you had spent 3 years carrying a responsibility that was never supposed to be yours, and the people who put it on you showed up at your most important moment trying to take the credit, what would you do? Would you stay silent one more time? Or would you finally let the truth speak for itself? Keep listening, because what happened next is something I never planned, and I am still living with the weight and the freedom of it. Age full script. My name is Emily. I was 24 years old when my life changed in a way I did not choose and did not understand until much later. I had a plan back then. A clear, simple, honest plan. I was going to finish my nursing degree, move into a small apartment near the hospital where I had already secured a student placement, and start building something that was mine. I had worked for that plan since I was 17. I had taken extra shifts at the pharmacy where I worked part-time. I had studied at kitchen tables and in library corners and in the break room of that same pharmacy during slow Tuesday evenings. I had done everything the right way, and I was almost there. My sister Vanessa was 21 at the time. She was the younger one, which in our family meant she was also the softer one, the protected one, the one my parents worried about more openly and forgave more quickly. I do not say that with bitterness anymore. I say it because it is simply true, and understanding it is the only way any of the rest of this makes sense. Vanessa was bright in flashes. She could charm a room in 60 seconds and make you feel like the most important person alive when her attention landed on you. But she was not consistent. She was not the kind of person who followed through on hard things. And she had spent most of her early 20s moving between decisions the way some people move between rooms, quickly, without settling, and without much thought for what she left behind. When Vanessa told our parents she was pregnant at 21, the news landed on our family dinner table like a stone dropped into still water. There was a long silence. Then my mother started crying quietly. Then my father asked about the father of the baby, and Vanessa said his name was Derek, and that they had been together for about 4 months and that he was not planning to stay. That was it. No drama, no raised voices. Just that flat, honest sentence from Vanessa, and then the silence came back and covered everything again. I was not at that dinner. I heard about it the next morning when my mother called me while I was getting ready for a clinical placement shift. She told me the news in a calm voice that I now recognize as the voice she uses when she has already made a decision and is presenting it as information rather than a choice. She told me Vanessa was keeping the baby. She told me Vanessa would need support. And then she said something I have turned over in my mind almost every day since. She said, "Emily, you have always been the strong one. We are going to need you to step up." I did not say no. That is the part I have had to sit with the most. I did not say no. I did not ask what stepping up meant. I did not ask what the plan was, or who was responsible for what, or where my own plans fit into the picture they were already drawing without me. I said okay. I said of course. And then I finished getting ready and went to my shift, and somewhere in the back of my mind a door closed quietly that I would not find my way back to for a very long time. Caleb was born 7 months later on a cold Tuesday in February. He was small and loud, and he had Vanessa's nose and a look in his eyes that even at 2 days old seemed like he was trying to figure out which direction was safe. I held him in the hospital room while Vanessa slept, and I remember thinking that he felt different from other babies I had held. He felt like a question no one had answered yet. Vanessa came home from the hospital and stayed with our parents for the first 2 weeks. I came over every evening after my shifts and on weekends. I helped with feedings. I sat with Caleb through the nights when he would not settle. I showed my mother how to swaddle him properly because she had forgotten after 21 years. I did all of this because I loved my family and because I thought this was what stepping up looked like: showing up, helping out, being present. I thought this was temporary. I thought once Vanessa found her footing, I would step back and return to my own life. That is not what happened. By the time Caleb was 6 weeks old, Vanessa had already started pulling back. It was not a dramatic exit. It was gradual, the way water drains slowly from a bathtub. First, she stopped getting up for the night feeds, saying she was exhausted and needed to recover. Then she started going out with friends on weekends, saying she needed to maintain her social connections for her mental health. Then she applied for a design course at a college 2 hours away, and my parents supported the decision with a level of enthusiasm that told me they had been expecting it, even hoping for it. The morning Vanessa left for college, I was at my parents' house helping Caleb eat breakfast. He was 10 weeks old and he had just started tracking faces properly, turning his head slowly to follow whoever was talking. Vanessa came downstairs with 2 bags and a coffee and kissed the top of his head. She said she would call every night. She said she would visit every other weekend. She said this was better for everyone because she needed to build something for herself so she could be a better mother later. My parents nodded. I said nothing. And Vanessa walked out the door, and that was the last time she lived under the same roof as her son. The calls every night lasted about 3 weeks. The visits every other weekend lasted about 6. After that, it became once a month, then once every 2 months, then occasional texts with photos of her design projects and questions about whether Caleb had said any new words. I answered the texts because no one else did. I answered them the same way I answered all the other things in that season of my life, automatically, without asking whether I should. It was my mother who first said it out loud. Caleb was 4 months old and I had been staying at my parents' house most nights because the night feeds were too much for my parents alone, and my father had a back problem that made picking up a crying baby at 2 in the morning genuinely painful for him. My mother sat across from me at the kitchen table one evening while Caleb slept in the bouncer between us, and she said, "Emily, we need to talk about what this looks like going forward." I asked her what she meant. She said she and my father were not young, and the night wakings were hard on them, and Vanessa was doing important work building her future, and it made the most sense if I moved back home for a while and took the primary role with Caleb. Just until Vanessa finished her course. Just until she was in a more stable position. Just for now. I was 24 years old. I had 8 months left in my nursing degree. I had a student placement already lined up. I had an apartment I had been excited about since I was 19. And my mother sat across from me and asked me, in her calm informational voice, to set all of it down and pick up her other daughter's baby instead. I said I would think about it. I went home that night and sat on my bed for a long time. I called my best friend Priya, and she listened carefully and then said with quiet concern, "Emily, if you say yes to this, make sure you know exactly what you are saying yes to." I appreciated that she said it. I did not listen to it the way I should have. I moved back into my parents' house 12 days later. I told myself it was temporary. I told my clinical placement supervisor that I needed a deferral for medical family reasons, and she was kind about it and gave me 1 semester. I told myself 1 semester would be enough. I was wrong about that, too. The first year with Caleb was the hardest and the most quietly beautiful thing I have ever lived through. I want to be honest about that, because it would be easier to paint it as pure sacrifice, but it was not. Caleb was a person who came into my life when he was barely a person at all, and I watched him become one. I watched him learn that the world was safe by testing whether I would come when he cried. I watched him figure out that his own hands belonged to him. I watched his face change from a newborn's blankness into something expressive and specific and entirely his own. I loved him in a way I had not planned for and could not have predicted. And that love made every sacrifice both more painful and more bearable at the same time. But loving Caleb did not make the rest of the situation easier to see clearly, and I was not seeing it clearly. Not yet. Vanessa called when she felt like it. Sometimes twice in 1 week, sometimes not at all for 3 weeks. When she called, she asked about Caleb with genuine warmth, but she also talked about her classes and her friends and a boy she was seeing named Marcus, and the conversations always ended with her saying she missed everyone and she was going to come visit soon. She visited 4 times in Caleb's first year of life. Each time she came, she held him like someone holding a relative's baby at a family gathering, carefully, warmly, but with the particular posture of a person who knows they are about to hand the baby back. My parents were grateful for what I was doing. I believe that. I believe they saw what it cost me and felt genuine appreciation. But gratitude and acknowledgement are different things, and what I received was mostly the first without much of the second. My name was not on any legal documents related to Caleb. I had no official standing as his caregiver. I had deferred my degree and my apartment and my placement and my independence, and none of that had been written down anywhere or discussed formally. It was all understood, which in family language often means it was all deniable. I want to tell you about the day I enrolled back in my nursing program because it is important for understanding everything that came after. Caleb was 14 months old. I had found a daycare near the college that was affordable and had good reviews. I had mapped out the bus route. I had spoken to my program coordinator about re-enrolling mid-year. I had done all of this planning quietly, in the margins of my days, and I sat down with my parents one Sunday afternoon and told them my plan. My mother's face did a thing I recognized. A small tightening, like the expression of someone receiving news they had been hoping to delay. She said she thought Caleb was still too young for daycare. She said the adjustment would be hard for him. She said maybe I could wait another 6 months, just until he was a bit more settled. My father nodded slowly. He did not add much, but his nod carried weight in our family. And I sat there with my plan in my hands, and I felt it begin to fold in on itself. I should have said no that Sunday. I should have said, I understand your concerns, but this is my decision and I am moving forward with it. I did not. I said I would think about it more. I put the plan back in the drawer where I kept my other deferred plans, and I went and sat with Caleb and read him a book about a bear and a moon, and he pointed at the pictures with his small finger and made sounds that were almost words, and I loved him so much I could not breathe past it. 6 months became another 6 months. I started doing online coursework when Caleb napped. I finished a module here and a unit there, but it was slow, uneven progress, and every time I looked up from my textbooks, I was back inside a life that was happening to me rather than one I was building for myself. I was 25, then 26. Caleb turned 1, then 2. He started walking with the slightly offbeat urgency of a person who had somewhere important to be. He started saying words, and then sentences, and the first full sentence he said tea. Omi was, Mama, where cup? And I laughed until my eyes were wet, and then I cried for a different reason when he was asleep that night. Vanessa came home for Caleb's 2nd birthday. She brought a large stuffed elephant and a card that said, "To my little love," in her handwriting. She was 23 by then, and she had finished her design course and moved in with Marcus in the city. She looked happy and polished and comfortable in a way that I could see had been built on the foundation of years that had been given to her by other people, mostly me. She played with Caleb for about an hour during the party. He was friendly but cautious with her, the way young children are with adults they have met only a few times. When she tried to pick him up, he turned toward me and reached back, and I saw something move across Vanessa's face, something she covered quickly with a smile. But I saw it. That evening after the party, when Caleb was in bed and my parents had gone upstairs, Vanessa and I sat in the kitchen with tea. She was quiet for a while, and then she said she had been thinking about the future. She said she and Marcus were stable now, they had a good apartment, she was working steadily as a freelance designer. She said she thought it might be time to talk about Caleb coming to live with her. She said it carefully, the way someone says a thing they have rehearsed, and I sat there holding my mug, and I felt something inside me go very still. I asked her what she meant by coming to live with her. She said she meant full-time. She said she was his mother, and she had always intended to step back in when she was ready, and she felt ready now. She said it would be a transition, obviously, and she was not planning to just take him overnight, there would be a process. She used the word process in a tone that suggested she had thought about this, and it was all very reasonable. I did not say everything I wanted to say that night. I said I thought we all needed to have a bigger conversation before any decisions were made, and that Caleb's well-being had to be the center of it. Vanessa nodded. She seemed relieved that I had not argued harder, which told me she had been expecting an argument. I said goodnight, and I went to my room, and I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling for a long time. That was the night I stopped being passive about my own life. Not loudly, not with a declaration, but something shifted inside me that night in a way that felt permanent. I started thinking clearly about the past 2.5 years in a way I had been avoiding. I started adding up what I had given, and what had been taken, and what had never been formally acknowledged. I started thinking about Caleb, what he needed, who knew him, what uprooting him meant for a 2-year-old who had one consistent person in his life. And I started thinking about myself in a way I had stopped doing somewhere around the time I moved back into my parents' house. Over the next several weeks, I did something I had never done before in my family. I started documenting. I kept a journal, simple and factual. Dates, events, conversations. Caleb's routines, his medical appointments, his developmental milestones. Not because I was planning a legal battle, but because I was starting to understand that the story of the last 2.5 years existed almost entirely in my memory, and memories can be rewritten by people who were not there. I also quietly reached back out to my nursing program coordinator. Her name was Sandra, and she had always been kind to me. I told her I was serious about returning and asked what completing my degree would require. She told me I needed 2 more full semesters of coursework plus my final clinical placement hours, and that if I enrolled in the coming intake, I could potentially graduate in about 16 months. 16 months. I wrote that number on a piece of paper and looked at it for a long time. I did not tell my parents about this conversation immediately. I was learning, slowly, that announcing plans in advance in my family gave people time to apply pressure before I had built enough resolve to resist it. So I enrolled quietly first. I arranged a childcare schedule quietly first. I contacted a local family law information clinic quietly first, just to understand what legal concepts like primary caregiver and de facto guardianship meant, because those words had started appearing in my thoughts and I needed to know what they actually signified. What I learned at that clinic appointment changed my understanding of my situation significantly. The legal aid volunteer I spoke to was a calm woman named Helen who listened to my summary without expression and then said, "What you're describing is that you have been the primary caregiver for this child for over 2 years. Courts take continuity of care very seriously for children this young. You have standing here, even without formal documents, if you can demonstrate the consistency of your role." She gave me some printed information sheets. I read them 3 times that night after Caleb went asleep. I want to be clear about something. I was not trying to take Caleb away from his mother. I was not plotting anything. What I was doing was beginning to understand, for the first time with real clarity, that my role in Caleb's life was real and significant and legally meaningful, and that it could be dismissed or rearranged by people who had not been doing the actual work if I did not begin to stand clearly in what I had actually done. That is different from revenge. That is just waking up. The conversation with my parents came about 3 weeks after Vanessa's birthday party announcement. I asked them to sit down with me one evening after Caleb was in bed. I told them I was re-enrolling in my nursing program. I told them I had arranged daycare for Caleb starting in 6 weeks. I told them I needed their support in making this transition work. And I told them, as clearly and calmly as I could, that any discussion about Caleb's living situation needed to involve me centrally, because I had been his primary caregiver for over 2 years, and his well-being was my first priority. My mother looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she thought it was a bit sudden. My father said he hoped I was not going to make things difficult with Vanessa. I noticed that neither of them said thank you. I noticed that neither of them said, "Of course, Emily, your education matters, your life matters, what you have done here has been extraordinary." They said sudden and difficult. And I sat with those 2 words and breathed through them and said, "I have thought about this carefully and I am moving forward." The next few weeks were tense in the way that only families can be tense, not with shouting, but with silences and looks and conversations that happened in other rooms that stopped when I walked in. Vanessa called from the city, and I could tell from my mother's careful voice on the phone that she was being updated about my re-enrollment. When Vanessa called me directly, she was not unkind, but she was pointed. She said she hoped I understood that her plan to have Caleb with her was still something she was serious about. I said I understood that she had a plan, and that I also had a plan, and that what mattered most was what was right for Caleb, and that should be a conversation, not a decision made by anyone individually. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "He's my son, Emily." I said, "I know." And for 2.5 years, I have been the one making sure he is safe and healthy and loved every single day. That matters too. There was a pause. Then Vanessa said, "I appreciate everything you've done." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I had received from her in 2.5 years, and it landed on me like a stone landing in a dry well, real, but hitting something hollow. Caleb started daycare 6 weeks later. It was harder for me than it was for him. He adapted quickly, the way children do when they feel fundamentally secure in their attachment to their primary person. He cried the first morning for about 4 minutes, and then a child in his room offered him a green truck, and he stopped crying and took the truck, and that was that. I cried in the car for 20 minutes. Mrs. Patel, my neighbor who had helped me many times over the past 2 years, called to check on me that evening and told me I was doing the right thing and that she was proud of me. And I almost fell apart completely, because it had been so long since anyone had said something that direct and kind about something I was doing for myself. I re-enrolled. I went back to class. My days became full in a different way than they had been full before, not with the constant physical weight of caregiving alone, but with the sharper, more focused effort of studying again, while still managing Caleb's pickups and dinners and bedtimes with my parents' help in the evenings. It was hard. It was a different kind of hard than the last 2.5 years, and it felt alive in a way that the other hard had not. I also made an appointment with a family lawyer. Not to file anything, just to understand. The lawyer's name was Mr. Osai, and he was thorough and direct and did not soften things unnecessarily. He told me that in cases where a child has lived with and bonded to a non-parent primary caregiver for an extended period, courts do consider the child's attachment and continuity of care as factors in any custody or residency determination. He told me my journal, my records of medical appointments, my evidence of daycare enrollment, my pattern of documented caregiving all had value. He told me I was not powerless. He also told me that if Caleb was ever moved suddenly in a way that disrupted his established care without my having any formal standing, I had options. Expensive options, but options. I left that office feeling mething I had not felt in a long time. Solid, like I was standing on ground that actually existed rather than ground that someone else controlled. The graduation story does not begin with the graduation itself. It begins about 4 months before it, when I was deep in my final semester, and Vanessa did something that crossed a line so specific and so clear that even I, who had spent years finding ways to excuse her behavior, could not soften it into something acceptable. She posted about Caleb on her social media. That alone was not new. She had always shared the occasional photo when she visited. But this post was different. This was a long, carefully written caption on a photo taken during her last visit where she was holding Caleb and he was laughing at something off camera. The caption talked about motherhood, about the beautiful chaos of raising a little one, about how much she had grown in the past 3 years, about how Caleb was her greatest teacher and her greatest love. It went on for several paragraphs, and it was full of the language of active, present, devoted motherhood. It received over 300 responses. People she knew, strangers, friends from her design community, all commenting about what a wonderful mother she was, how lucky Caleb was, how clear the bond was. I read that caption sitting in the library between 2 classes. I read it twice. And then I put my phone face down on the table and stared at the wall for several minutes. The bond in that photo was real, but it was not hers. That laugh, that ease, that open and trusting expression on Caleb's face, I knew where that came from. I had built that. 3 years of consistent presence, of nighttime reassurance, of steady love, of showing up every single time. And Vanessa had taken a photograph during a 2-hour visit and written a tribute to herself as a mother based on what my love had built. I did not comment on the post. I did not send her a message. I sat with it for 2 days. Then I called Priya, and Priya listened to the whole thing, and at the end she said, "Emily, you know you don't have to keep being silent about this." I said I knew. She said, "The problem with being the quietly capable one in a family is that people start to believe their version of the story because you never told yours." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. I made a decision, not an angry decision, a clear one. I opened my own social media account, which I had kept mostly private for years, and I posted a photo. It was a photo I had taken on Caleb's first birthday, him in his high chair, both hands deep in birthday cake, face completely covered in frosting, laughing so hard his eyes were disappearing. I was beside him, also laughing, and one of his small hands was gripping my finger. I wrote a simple caption. I said, "This was Caleb's first birthday 3 years ago. He is the best thing in my world. I have had the privilege of being his primary caregiver since he was 6 weeks old, and watching him grow has changed everything I understand about love and strength. He is extraordinary. More on our journey soon." I tagged nothing and named no one. The response from people who knew our family was not immediate, but it was not nothing either. Some people who knew both me and Vanessa saw the post and understood the context without needing it spelled out. A few sent me private messages. One was from my aunt on my father's side, a woman named Aunt Grace who had always been direct with me in a way my immediate family was not. She said, "Emily, I am glad you said something. We have all seen what you have carried, and I am proud of you." That message made me cry in the good way, and I saved it. My parents called that evening. My mother said she was worried that I was going to cause family drama. My father said things were complicated enough without me putting things on the internet. I listened to both of them, and then I said, "I posted one honest photo with one honest caption about my life and the child I have cared for. That is not drama. That is just the truth." My mother started to say something about Vanessa's feelings, and I said, gently but clearly, "Mom, when is the conversation going to be about my feelings?" And then there was a long silence, and my father made a throat-clearing sound, and my mother said she would call me tomorrow, and the call ended. Vanessa did not call me. She texted. The text said, "I saw your post. I think we need to talk." I replied, "I agree. Let me know when you're free." She did not reply to that message for 11 days. Meanwhile, I had a degree to finish. The last semester of nursing school is not a semester that permits distraction. Clinical placement hours, final exams, skills assessments, the exhausting and clarifying experience of finally doing the work you have spent years preparing for and finding out that you can actually do it. I threw myself into those months with everything I had. My supervising nurse. On placement was a woman named Sharon who told me in my mid-placement review that I had strong instincts and a calm presence in difficult situations, and that she hoped I would consider the ward's graduate program. I drove home from that review feeling something I had not felt in years. Like myself. Like the version of myself I had been building toward since I was 17. Caleb came to pick me up from the hospital with my mother one afternoon and ran across the car park with his arms out, and I caught him and spun him around and pressed my face into his hair and thought, I can have both. I can love him and still have my own life. These do not have to be opposites. The people around me had treated them like opposites for 3 years, and I had believed them. But it was not true. 2 weeks before my graduation ceremony, Vanessa finally called. She was in the city, and she was calm on the phone, and she said she wanted to talk about the future. I said that was fine. She said she felt like her social media post had been about sharing her love for her son, and my post had felt like a response that made her look like an absent mother. I said that I understood she felt that way. I also said that the facts in my caption were accurate and that I had not named her or made any accusatory statement. She was quiet. Then she said she was planning to come to my graduation. I said that was fine. She said she wanted to bring Marcus. I said that was fine. She said she was planning to bring Caleb up on stage with her during the family photo part. I said, Vanessa, Caleb is not your prop for the day. If he comes to the graduation, it is because we decide together that it is appropriate for a 2.5-year-old to sit through a 3-hour ceremony. She said she was just trying to support me. I said, then come and support me. The call ended with a politeness that sat uneasily over everything unsaid between us. I went back to my study notes and tried to focus, and I mostly succeeded, but the conversation left a residue that I could not quite wash off. My graduation was on a Friday in late November. The ceremony was at the college hall, and it was the kind of occasion that feels both monumentally important and slightly unreal at the same time, the way all moments you have worked toward for years tend to feel when they finally arrive. I had asked Mrs. Patel to watch Caleb during the ceremony itself. He was too young for a 3-hour sitting, just as I had told Vanessa, and Mrs. Patel had been part of our lives long enough that Caleb was comfortable with her. She was going to bring him to the reception afterward so he could be part of the celebration. My family arrived together, my parents, Vanessa, and Marcus. They were dressed well. Vanessa was in a cream-colored dress that looked like something you would wear to a garden party or a bridal shower. She had her hair professionally styled. She had, I noted with a quiet neutrality, put a great deal of effort into her appearance for my graduation. More effort than I had seen her put into any of Caleb's milestones. My mother hugged me and told me she was proud. My father shook my hand with the particular formality he used when he was feeling emotions he did not know how to speak. Vanessa hugged me and said I looked beautiful. Marcus was pleasant and quiet. I noticed something almost immediately once we were all inside. Vanessa was talking to people. Not to the other graduates or their families, but to people who knew our family, extended relatives who had come, a family friend named Carol who had known us since I was a child. And she was talking in a way that was warm and expansive, and that included the word we a lot. We are so proud of her. We have all been on this journey together. It has been quite a few years for our family. Carol caught my eye at one point with a look that I read clearly. She knew. She knew what the we was covering. I collected my degree at the appropriate moment. I walked across the stage, and I shook the dean's hand, and I held that rolled document, and I thought about the kitchen table, and the break room, and the library, and the night feeds, and the daycare drop-offs, and the Mr. Osei appointment, and Sharon's mid-placement review, and the green truck that stopped Caleb's crying on his first day, and I felt the full weight of everything it had taken to get from there to here. I smiled. It was a real smile. Mrs. Patel arrived with Caleb during the reception, which was held in the college courtyard. He spotted me from across the grass and came at me with the full-body urgency of a child who has not seen their person in 4 hours and has opinions about it. I caught him and he wrapped both arms around my neck and said, "Mama, hat." He had spotted the graduation cap I was still wearing. I put it on his head. It fell down over his eyes. He giggled. Everyone around us laughed. It was a perfect moment, and I want to hold it exactly as it was because what happened next tried to reach backward and recolor it. Vanessa had been watching this from about 10 feet away. When I stood up with Caleb still on my hip, I saw her moving toward us. She came to stand beside me, and she put her arm around my shoulders, and she turned toward a small cluster of family friends and relatives, and she said, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "This is what family looks like. We all got through this together. I am so proud of my sister and so grateful to everyone who helped us raise this beautiful boy." She said us. She said we. She said it standing next to me with her arm around my shoulders and a smile that could have been printed on a greeting card. I felt the shift in the air around us. I could see Carol's expression. I could see Aunt Grace, who had come to the graduation, turn her head toward Vanessa with a look I could not fully read from where I was standing. I could see my mother watching Vanessa speak with an expression of careful pride, like someone watching a performance they had helped rehearse. And Caleb, on my hip, turned toward Vanessa when she spoke, the polite, slightly cautious turn of a child acknowledging someone familiar but not primary, and then turned back to me. He patted my cheek with his small hand. He said, "Mama." One of the family friends said, "Oh, is that his mom?" And they were looking at Vanessa. There was a pause. Vanessa's smile did not change, and I heard myself say, quietly and clearly, with Caleb's hand still on my face, "He has a biological mother and he has me. I have been caring for him full-time since he was 6 weeks old. He calls me Mama because I have been here every day." I did not say it loudly. I did not say it with anger. I said it the way you say something true when it is simply time for it to be said. The pause that followed was not comfortable. The family friend who had asked the question said, "Oh," in a tone that suggested she was now doing a rapid recalculation of everything Vanessa had been saying for the last hour. Carol touched my arm briefly. Aunt Grace came and stood close to me in a way that felt like solidarity made physical. Vanessa lowered her arm from my shoulders. She did not say anything immediately. Marcus put a hand on her back. My mother turned away. My father looked at the ground. After a moment, Vanessa said, "Emily, can we talk privately?" I said, "We can talk. But first I am going to enjoy this moment with the people who are actually here to celebrate me, and then we can talk." I turned back to the small group and smiled, and someone said congratulations, and someone else asked about my nursing placement, and the conversation moved forward. And Caleb ate 3 small sandwiches from the reception table and pointed at a bird on the fence and said "buh," which was his current word for bird, and the afternoon continued. The talk with Vanessa happened later in the car park as families were beginning to leave. It was the 4 of us, me, Vanessa, and our parents. Marcus had the good sense to take Caleb for a short walk among the parked cars so the adults could speak. Vanessa said she had not meant to make it seem like she had been the primary caregiver. She said she just got carried away expressing gratitude and pride. She said she loved Caleb, and she hated feeling like she was being painted as the villain. My mother said she thought I could have handled the moment more gracefully. My father said he hoped we were not going to make today into something ugly. I stood in that car park with my graduation gown still on, and I looked at each of them in turn. And I said something I had not rehearsed, but that came out clean and whole, the way sentences do when they have been forming in the honest part of you for a long time. I said, "I have not made anything ugly. What was ugly was spending 3 years caring for a child that I love deeply, without one formal acknowledgement, without legal protection, without anyone sitting down and saying, 'Emily, this is what we are asking you to do, and this is what you will need, and this is how we will support you.' What was ugly was watching someone who visited 4 times in a year speak at my graduation as though she had been here. I am not attacking Vanessa. I am not trying to take anything from her. I am standing here saying clearly, for maybe the first time, that what I did was real, and it mattered, and it cost me something, and the truth of that deserves to exist out loud." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Vanessa said, "I know what you did, I do know." Her voice had changed. The performance quality was gone. She sounded, for the first time in a long time, like herself. "I know what you gave up. I have always known. I didn't know how to say thank you because saying thank you meant admitting how much I left you with." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in 3 years. It did not fix anything. But it changed the shape of the thing between us from things solid and cold into something that could maybe, eventually, be worked with. I looked at my parents. My mother had tears on her face. My father was looking at something in the middle distance with an expression I had to read as shame because I knew his face and I knew he understood fully what I was saying. After a long moment he said, "You're right, Emily. We should have done this differently. We should have protected you better." He did not say more. It was not a flood of apology. But it was real, and from my father, who had not said something that honest to me in years, it landed hard. The weeks and months after graduation were not a clean resolution. Real life does not work that way, and I was not looking for a fairy tale. What I was looking for was clarity, and I found it not all at once, but gradually, the way a landscape becomes visible as a fog lifts. I accepted the graduate nursing position on Sharon's ward. I arranged for Caleb to transition to a slightly longer daycare schedule to accommodate my shifts. My parents were supportive of this in a more active way than they had been before the graduation, as though the conversation in the car park had moved something in them permanently. My mother started saying, "I am proud of you, Emily," in a way that was direct and personal rather than wrapped in collective language about the family. Vanessa and I had 2 more long conversations over the next 2 months. They were difficult and necessary. She was honest in them about the choices she had made and the reasoning she had used to justify them at the time, that I was stronger, that I had wanted to help, that the situation was temporary, and she had believed that, and I was honest about how those reasons had landed from where I was standing. We did not arrive at a simple forgiveness. We arrived at something more complicated and more real, which was an understanding that we had both been shaped by a family dynamic that handed things to the person most likely to carry them quietly, and that we had both participated in it in different ways. The question of Caleb's living situation was addressed formally, finally, in a conversation that included both my parents, Vanessa, Marcus, and me. Vanessa said she still wanted to be Caleb's mother in a real and active way, and I said I supported that completely. I had never wanted to remove her from his life. What I needed was for my role to be acknowledged and protected, and for any transition in Caleb's daily care to happen slowly, carefully, and in his interest rather than for the convenience of the adults around him. Vanessa agreed. Marcus, who had said little in most of these conversations, said something I genuinely appreciated. Vanessa and I have talked about this a lot, and we both understand that Emily is not the obstacle here. She's the reason Caleb is the happy, secure kid he is. Any plan we make needs to start from that. It did not all happen in a single afternoon. It happened over many months, through school pickups and shared dinners and occasional awkward moments and slow, careful rebuilding. Caleb began spending 2 weekends a month with Vanessa and Marcus, which he came to enjoy because Vanessa was warm and the apartment was full of interesting things. He still came home to me. He still called me Mama. Vanessa, to her credit, did not try to change that. She told me once that she had started to understand that love was not a fixed amount that could be divided and diminished, and that Caleb having me was not the same as Caleb losing her. I am 28 years old now. I work 3 days a week on Sharon's ward, and on my days off I take Caleb to the park or the library or the place near our neighborhood where there are ducks on a small pond, and he loses his mind with joy every single time. I live in the apartment I deferred for 3 years. It is small, and it has a second bedroom with a toddler bed in it and a shelf of board books, and that is how I want it. My name is on a lease that is mine. My schedule is mine. My choices are mine. I look back at the person I was when my mother called me on that early morning before my clinical shift and said, "We need you to step up," and I feel so many things for her. I feel love for her, the same way you love a version of yourself that was doing their best with what they knew. I feel sadness for some of what she did not say and should have. I feel respect for how hard she worked and how much she loved and how long she kept going. And I feel something else, something that does not have a simple name, a kind of quiet insistence that who she was and what she did should be known clearly. Not to punish anyone, not to keep score, but because the truth of a life deserves to take up space in the world, because things that are real should be allowed to be real. Caleb is 3 years old now. He is fearless and curious, and he has opinions about everything, including the correct order in which animals should be in. Aimed when looking at picture books, and the right way to hold a crayon, and whether sandwiches taste different when cut in triangles versus rectangles. He is the most specific, alive, entirely himself little person I have ever known. He did not make my life smaller. He made it richer in ways I still do not have full language for. But I also know now that loving someone completely does not mean disappearing for them. It means staying present while also staying whole. That is the lesson I will carry forward from everything these 3 years held. My nursing career is mine. My apartment is mine. My graduation photograph, the one with my cap on Caleb's head, both of us laughing, is on my wall. In it, I am wearing my gown and holding this small, ridiculous, joyful child, and we are both in the middle of a laugh, and you can see clearly that we know each other completely. That photograph is the most honest document of my last 3 years, not the social media captions, not the family speeches. Not the story that got told when I was not in the room. That photograph. That is the one I keep. If you have ever been the person in your family who was quietly handed more than your share because people believed you could carry it, the strong one, the dependable one, the one who would not complain, I want you to know that I see you. Emily's story is not just about a baby, or a graduation, or a moment in a car park. It is about what happens when you stop performing the role someone else assigned you and start telling the truth about what you actually lived. If Emily's story reminded you of your own, or someone you love, I want to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done differently? What would you have said sooner? And if you are somewhere in the middle of a season like this, carrying more than you should, staying quiet longer than is good for you, this might be the moment to ask yourself what stepping up for your own life looks like. Emily did. And it changed everything.